as promised, here on Road Miles, we have David Manley. Is it David or Dave? I've never really known. I've always called you Dave, and the main reason for that is because I think it's nice to have a friend whose name is Dave. You can just say, "Hey, Dave."
It's nice to be Dave.
You like being Dave?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I always thought of myself as David, and since you brought it up. And at some point, probably in undergrad, I just sort of like realized that everyone just calls me Dave, and I was like, I guess I'm a Dave.
So you became Dave unwittingly.
Yeah. I still to this day only introduce myself as David, but it's not because of a preference. It's just a habit that I have never broken. So like at work, everyone just calls me David. Because people just go with however you introduce yourself at work. But everyone in my personal life calls me Dave.
Doesn't that say something about you, though, that you don't have a preference as to your own name? Like, how many people do you know that don't really care what their name, is, who calls them what? Or maybe you do care.
It's a fair point. Yeah, I think most people have a preference, but both are great. I love both. It's very uncharacteristic of me, really, to be so happy with the name I was given. But like,
do you remember, like,
solid name? It works both ways.
When you used to impersonate my mother in the McGill days, you would do her voice pretty well, but then you would make a point of saying, Nicholas, because that's my given legal name, and, it's funny.
Yes.
I don't know if it's the same for David.
Yeah, it is. I mean, in a weird way, in my personal life, it ended up feeling more intimate to be called David because everyone called me Dave. That's sort of being thrown off by the fact that everyone at work calls me David. And, believe it or not, I'm not all that intimate with most of my coworkers.
No, I believe it. So it's actually more intimate. So I'm not a good friend. I'm not in the David bucket, is what you're saying, because I've been in the Dave zone for, almost 25 years.
No one really, it's like, I think it's because it's like a mother thing or something like that. It's like Michelle never calls me David. No one calls me David except maybe I don't know. It just, this will probably get cut from the final
This
thing.
is all going in. This is the best way to set up the interview because it's a window into how your brain works. Tell me about like the pre McGill Dave, right? So we met in college, met at university. That's where our friendship started. That's the version of Dave I know. But I don't know much about pre-McGill Dave other than the odd anecdote from our other mutual friends.
Back when really time, you just have so much time that you don't even pause for a second to think about whether something is a good use of your time.
There's no concept of the time running out or even that it's needed for other
time
stuff.
Is just infinite. There's just endless rolling ahead. Not only is time infinite, but your youth is infinite. It's just going to keep going. And that lack of a sense of urgency does lead to things like thinking you should spend an entire weekend watching movies.
Did you ever get invited to parties in high school, Dave?
Oh, no.
Actual parties?
No. Yeah, I was not one of the cool kids. That's for sure. For a couple of reasons, probably. But yeah, I was very shy in high school. I had the music friends, and I had the video game friends, and the movie friends, and that kind of thing. It really was all like, what are you into?
Yeah.
What do you feel like? Like, it was all like common interests and stuff like that,
Any dating going on?
Oh God. No, I feel like it was so close to happening so many times, and like a few discouraging things happened that just made me such a coward, that it just sort of didn't happen.
Didn't happen.
Yeah, yeah. I remember one of the most poignant memories I have was uh, I had a minimum wage job at a restaurant, and there was
Perkins.
a Perkins family
See,
restaurant. Yep.
I,
There's a really pretty girl I got along with really well that I worked with there. And on my last day of my job, I wanted to, like, when I quit that job, wanted to ask her on a date. And unfortunately, she had left before, like, there's some mismatch in the timing. And she was gone before me. And so I wasn't able to do it. And then I ran into her in the shopping mall across the street after the shift, and I chickened out.
is it because it
So
was out of context? You weren't in the little work zone there anymore. So now it's real world and stakes are
yeah, and
high.
also like she was like her parents were there, and I just like couldn't do it in front of them,
Yeah.
Well, I was hired as support staff, which means busboy and host and cashier, but you know, I I had a lot of pimples on my face in those days, and so they didn't really want me greeting customers. And from sometimes I would work the cash, but one time, if you're working the cash, you're also answering the phone. And one time, the phone rang and I answered it, and it turned out to be one of the owners of the restaurant. And when he came in later that shift, he came up to me and was like, "Did you answer the phone when I called earlier?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, it sounded like a funeral parlor." And I never got put on the cash register again. I think I just had too monotone a voice or something. They want you to be so cheerful.
Everybody's
And
got
I
to have a
just,
customer service job at that age, though, right? Or
yeah,
something in the service industry, and
yeah.
it makes you appreciate how hard a job that is. Part of the tricky stuff going on, you're growing up, you're going to high school, is you're not exactly living a totally private life either, right? There's a bit of public scrutiny. Your dad was a federal cabinet minister, public figure, so that trickles down. You got a few eyes on you. I remember you telling me that was never the easiest thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of weird for every teacher in your high school to know who you are before they've met you and like have opinions about your parents before they know anything about you. Um, it just like makes you feel like you're under scrutiny all the time. And also, I just had it drilled into my head. I don't know whether my parents did this deliberately. I doubt they did. I think I got it into my head that anything I did could make it into the news. So I was just, always kind of anxious and worried about doing anything that would, you know, reflect poorly on my dad in the news. And it sort of like hung over everything.
Did they give you some example where that happened to someone else, or did that
No, I
spark
mean,
that?
no, I remember, you would see articles from time to time about like family members of American public figures and stuff like that. And so you knew it was like possible. But I mean, you certainly weren't seeing articles about, that, kids of public figures doing the kinds of things I would have been getting up to. But like, I just felt this um, obligation to be a representative of my family in a way, which was just kind of weird. Um, and everyone in my school, I was so shy, but everyone in my school knew who I was, and knew my dad was a public figure. They didn't know who he was. They'd be like, "Is he the mayor of Canada or whatever?"
There is an actual
Um,
mayor of Canada, I think. But I
um,
mean, but Ottawa is, I mean, to clarify, I mean, Ottawa, Canada's capital city, is ultimately a small town, right? So if you go to a high school and your dad's a public figure, even if they don't know what minister he is a minister of,
well,
it means something.
he would, you know, your MP my dad at least would send a Christmas card to every constituent with a photo of his family.
So
So
your
everyone
face
would,
is plastered all over everywhere.
yeah, people would see this,
Yeah.
like, because everyone at my school was in the riding.
I
Yeah.
started getting those cards, believe it or not, in the mail when we went to McGill.
You got added to the list.
I got added to the list. And what struck me is the sweater coordination that went on in your family every year. And you know, maybe you've blocked that from your memory, but the sweaters all matched. Everybody looked really good. But that's like in all seriousness, that's a burden to bear, right? This is basically pre-internet, even though your dad kind of invented the school internet, by the way, late 90s, school net. The internet that we all grew up on in school was thanks to John. But this is before cell phone cameras. There's no social media.
Okay, let me give you a couple of examples of things that were kind of weird. Like, I don't know how this one teacher didn't know who I was or something. Or maybe he did. You tell me what you think. After one of the elections, kids in the class were asking him who he voted for, and everyone knew he lived in the riding too. And he said, "I went down to the voting station, the polling station, and I told them I'm not voting for anyone because there's nobody honorable on the ballot." Which, like, is a really weird thing to hear when one of your parents was like on the ballot, from one of your teachers.
And this is your teacher. What? Like,
yeah, this was my teacher. Yeah.
How do you work with that exactly, right? Sorry, welcome to science class. Your homework is due. By the way, I don't trust your parents.
By this point, I was pretty lippy and I did not like him. And I had accumulated a backlog of detention for him. And so after class that day, I confronted him and I was like, "I did not appreciate you telling the entire class you don't think my father is honorable." And he looked shocked and like forgave my detention backlog. Another story, I had a politics class and that teacher declared to the class one day that my dad was over as a politician.
This is before he was the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada.
Yeah, he was he was industry minister at that time. But it doesn't matter. Like, the point is, those kinds of things are just kind of weird to experience as a kid. People would, my parents kept their phone number and address in the phone book because they didn't want to act aloof. But then too many people came to our house. Like, nothing scary ever happened, but like, a taxi driver would come with a gift basket, that kind of thing.
Really? People would just show up?
Yeah. And if, probably recent immigrants who are following a norm that back home might be typical, like you'd bring a gift to your local representative or whatever. And it was always well-meaning stuff, but, another weird thing was like, in those days, it was all landlines, right? So people would call our house all the time. Crazy people would call. And whenever I answered the phone, if someone called and they wanted to talk to my dad, I'd have to screen call. So I'd deal with these people sometimes, and I'd listen for a long time sometimes, take messages and that kind of stuff. It's really weird. It's really, in hindsight, there are a lot of things that like, I just don't think my parents had any idea how much burden there was.
So, I mean, by the time you get to McGill, having been through all of that, you're probably just as excited as I remember being to get to a city like Montreal and away from the bubble and,
Yeah, it was awesome.
Why did you pick McGill?
Why McGill? Because it was awesome. I mean, Montreal was awesome. I applied to a bunch of schools in Ontario and McGill. And I got into McGill and I was like, that's where I'm going, because I wanted to go live in Montreal,
It was awesome, especially for me coming from Calgary. Couldn't have been a different place. My dad had gone to McGill and the recruiters came to our high school and did a presentation, and I was interested and applied just like you, but he took me down there in the summer of my maybe grade 11 year, and I remember wandering around campus and going through the city and thinking, this is like, for someone from Alberta to show up in Montreal, I mean, it was a different place. But yeah, I was blown away by it. And I think even in second year when you and I met, I was still trying to figure. Let's be honest, I didn't make the most of my time in Montreal.
None of us did. I mean, you still have that sense of like infinite time ahead of you in undergrad. Like when I think about how much time was squandered on the silliest stuff, it's kind of crazy. The things that make that time great, like if you had a sense of scarcity about it, you wouldn't have done, the things that stick with you the most either. Because, one of the things that I really miss, I don't know about you, but it's this long, stupid conversations where we'd like sit and drink all afternoon.
Hours.
Just talk about stupid stuff. And it was really fun. And if we had had a sense that this is all going to be over in a flash, I don't know that we would have been able to settle in so comfortably and do all that stupid stuff.
Like, this is exactly partly why I started RoadMiles. I was thinking about the fact that when you're in those moments, you're not thinking about the passage of time, but, now that we are, and I don't know about you, but I'm way more acutely aware of it than I ever was. I think back to it and I wish I could remember more. Like I don't have a lot of, so I wrote down some keywords from, the McGill days that I thought might resonate with you. And I thought I'd just read them out. You can pick which ones ring true. I wrote down Plas Milton, green beans and pork, procrastination, eating slowly, debating, all-day conversations, liberal McGill, video games, and wasting time. Like, that's the best I could do to summarize that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think each one of those things was beloved.
Yeah.
Like the all-day breakfast at Plas Milton being a good example, right? You would show up there, we would sit down at noon or later on a Sunday, and for $5.95 you'd get 3 crepes, 3 eggs, sausage, bacon, hash browns, beans, and unlimited refills of coffee. And everybody would just talk for hours.
You just sit and get refill after refill of coffee. And I remember at McGill Pizza, so it was $4.25 for like a full breakfast.
Amazing.
And that included tax. So with tip, $5. And like, I wondered why the waitress there never seemed excited to see us. It's like 75 cents for her to refill my cup of coffee like 30 times
for 4 hours.
Yeah, and it would take me that 4 hours to eat the potatoes on my plate because I ate very slowly in those
Do you
days.
eat fat? Like, so I wrote that down on purpose because I remember it did seem to take you
I was a very
physically.
slow eater in those days.
Are you still?
I eat a lot faster now.
Yeah.
I do eat a lot faster now. I think there are a few things going on. Like I was so unaware of mental health stuff in those days. And I just think like I was walking around with just like an intense level of anxiety in the pit of my stomach that, tightened my esophagus right up,
Yeah.
And, it took, I mean, I was a slow eater for a long time, but I was also anxious for a long time. I had such a weird kind of way of existing at McGill because I was like having so much fun, but I was also so unhappy, right? Like I couldn't fall asleep for a couple of years. I couldn't fall asleep before like 5 or 6 in the morning every night. I'd be up all night stressing. And then I'd be so tired all day that, I'd miss class. I'd have such a hard time focusing. And, there were so many things going on at the same time, none of which I was doing anything about. And one of the things I've learned more recently, like, is ADHD. So many of the things that I had completely internalized as kind of character defects of mine are just symptoms of ADHD.
They're just common traits. Yeah.
Yeah. And
but the guilt you put on yourself, I mean, me too.
You put
right?
it, well, not only do you walk around with guilt, you have a delusion that if you could just be a better person, this problem wouldn't be a problem and you could just get out of your own way and do things. And I was a smart kid that couldn't get myself to study. Like I just, I did appallingly poorly in undergrad and it never even occurred to me to look into whether there was anything going on. Like I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and I couldn't focus. And I didn't do anything about it except self-medicate in ways that were not especially helpful.
Yeah, I did my fair share of that right up until, probably 5 years ago. But the crazy thing is back then, like, do you have it? I don't have any memory of, much in the way of promotion on campus about, hey,
oh, none.
Here's some mental health resources for you. Here's what what you're feeling
might be. It was a totally
might be.
different time.
Yeah, it was nothing.
It was so completely. It's kind of amazing how just not in the discourse mental health stuff is. Like stuff that's just commonplace, just totally understood now. I think the conventional wisdom at that time was ADHD was a made up thing that sort of justifies drugging kids instead of teaching them discipline or whatever.
The stereotype is a hyperactive 6-year-old, right? Not a student or an adult that is putting themselves in a situation needlessly. Yeah. The number of times I spent all night in the library firing off a term paper, it wasn't because, oh, shit, I forgot to do this. It's due tomorrow. It's because that time pressure for me was the only way to light the furnace.
Focus,
yeah. And I mean, it's still that way for me.
The thing that's remarkable, so we both struggled with ADHD before being diagnosed, but like you got good marks and then you went straight into law school with your great marks and you managed to kill law school even though you spent the entire time working as a flight attendant.
I was never there. I don't think I went to law school, actually.
It's totally wild. But my experience was so different. Like, I didn't go to class. I missed exams, you know.
Look, I went to an exam where I opened the textbook and took the shrink wrap off it in the exam. Yeah. But I mean, same thing.
No, but you got good marks, and you went straight into law school. Out of undergrad, I needed to just work for a few years because there was nowhere that would take someone with my GPA. Let's see. I did a couple of internships, that kind of thing. The biggest one was in Honduras, where I worked for 6 months for an NGO. I think we've talked before about how I didn't think long term at all. And I remember, like, the idea of committing to a job for like 6 months was like, this is after undergrad. It was just so insane to me. Like, 6 whole months in one job. But I ended up taking a job. I worked for probably between 6 or 9 months. And in the dead of winter, I was just like, I cannot stay in Ottawa anymore. It's too cold. And I quit. I'd saved up like a few $1,000s. And I was like, I gotta get out of here. And I quit. I bought a return flight for 3.5 months in Southeast Asia. I just saved up enough money to buy a plane ticket and pay for time in hostels for a few months. And I just like flew to Southeast Asia and backpack around for 3.5 months, spent every last penny I had, then came home with no plan. But yeah, there was no long-term thinking there at all. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Eventually ended up, because of my history in politics and stuff like that, I was able to get a job in a minister's office. I would not say I was punching above my weight.
So you're a political staffer, which is kind of ironic because my recollection of your, taste for that world was you weren't necessarily the biggest fan of that.
No, I wasn't. I mean, I was always interested in politics and public policy and that kind of thing. But yeah, I didn't want to go into that world. It just sort of, at a certain point, I needed a proper job and there was an opportunity there. So that's what I did. Worked there a couple of years. Then I went to U of T. That's where I met Michelle, where I did my master's at U of T. And one thing led to another, and here we are.
But don't underplay that. Okay, hold on. So a bit of aimless drifting after undergrad, some world travels, working in Honduras, for an NGO, these are not just trivial. Like, you did some good, meaningful stuff. Then you go and get an MBA. Then you do further studies at the Mugg Center, and then you're at HEC in Europe.
Yeah, you're sort of, yeah. I mean,
but you're glossing over. I mean, you've got 9,000 university degrees.
Yeah, I have 3 degrees. It's not 9,000. It's 3. But yeah, it's kind of. I kept going back to school. Well, what happened was, I did the master's degree. I was great socially, but it was a program in its first year, and what it really seemed to do was train people to be excellent dinner party guests. It was a really well-rounded worldly education. You learn a lot about how things work. But it was billed as a sort of MBA type of program, but for people who aren't interested in global affairs and public policy. And the thing is, with an MBA, employers know what an MBA is. And if you get good marks at a good MBA, there are a few basic things that they can be pretty confident that you know. But no one had heard of a Master of Global Affairs, and no one was really interested in knowing what it was. So we all came out of it and like we couldn't find jobs. I mean, there are a few people who could. There's certainly some really motivated people who found something, but like it took a long time for me to find a job after the MGA. Um, but it was still an interesting experience, and we're still many close friends from that program. I don't regret doing it. Obviously, I met my wife in the program. After that, after 7 months of unemployment, after the MGA, I got a job at the Toronto Star, and then a year after that, I was like, I need, I need a better job, and so I thought, I mean, really, what it came down to is I had really killed the GMAT. I did the GMAT to get into the MGA, and it was like 99th percentile, and it was on the last year before it expired. And I was like, if I'm going to use that GMAT to get into a good MBA program, now's my last chance, or I'm going to have to do the GMAT again.
Yeah.
So
Again,
that sort of
time blindness.
Yeah. So yeah, then I spent some time in Paris doing an MBA, which was awesome. I mean, just for the time in Paris, it was worth it. Such a lovely city. I loved France. I wanted to stay in Europe, and I think I could have. I would have been able to find a job and someone who was willing to sponsor a visa and that kind of thing. But Michelle got a new job while I was like finishing up the MBA, and it was just like one of those moments where it's like, oh, okay, I knew in an instant that I was at a crossroads. I'm either, going home, making it work at home to be with Michelle, or that relationship's not going to work out. It wasn't like a tough decision. It was sort of like, oh, either I go home to be with Michelle or I stay here and we're probably going to be done. And yeah, there was no mulling at all. I just knew right away what I had to do.
And it's funny because my guess, I mean, you look at the rest of our friends scattered all over the world kind of now and then. People, Daniel's over in Europe, Max back to the UK, Sam's in Asia. I know for me, I had no idea I'd be going right back to Calgary, Alberta too. I mean, we all ended up in McGill and Montreal thinking kind of like that mindset about there's endless time. There's endless opportunity to go different places, be somewhere else in the world. And you and I both ended up right back in our almost in our hometowns, not quite, but
yeah.
Speaking of Europe, I'm sort of digressing for a second, but did you get a speeding ticket or a parking ticket when we were in Italy in 2023?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I did too, because today in the mail, I get a piece of paper from some collection agency.
Oh, you just got one.
For €100, from some toll high-speed camera on the toll road, from 2023.
Yeah, no, mine was, I'd driven on a restricted road without realizing it. And they must have caught me through a camera or whatever. And I thought it was fake. I was like, okay, the Italian government if it is real, the Italian government is certainly not organized enough to be on top of me about this. So I just threw it out. And then I got another letter and another one and another one. And the fine kept ratcheting up each time. And then it was like, we're going to send this to collections and you're not going to be able to come back to Italy. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what the threat was, but it seemed like they weren't joking around. And I actually sent them an email and I negotiated down a lower fine. I was like, okay, I was just really disorganized and I forgot to pay it. Can we go back to the original price and I'll pay it tomorrow? And that's what they did. They went along with it. They were like, okay. I kind of approached life more as an anthropologist than a human. Like I was among you, but not really one of you, which is obviously an absurd thing. Part of it is the fact that I had this idea in my gut. Right? You know, we were all, I think our generation was sort of raised with this idea that we are the authors of our own fates. Um, you know, we all got that advice about doing what you love and, you'll never work a day in your life and that kind of thing. And it just sort of felt like until I'm able to write my own fate, whatever's happening isn't really real. And I just sort of like let things happen, whenever, especially after my master's degree, it was so hard for actually before as well. Like I had a few experiences having so much trouble finding a job um, that to this day, I find it very hard to say no to any job offer I get. It's like the first thing that comes along. If I'm looking for a job, it's like, oh, if I get an offer, it's very hard to step back and be like,
Yeah.
actually, no, thanks. And which means I wasn't taking the reins in some sense. And because I was expecting at some point to be taking the reins, everything that happened that felt like it was just circumstances working out a certain way, I didn't feel like a full participant in,
Is that dissociation?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know really what, I couldn't give you, is that a psychological term?
I think so, but like meaning that you're, like you say, you're spectating a bit or you're just checked out a bit. It's not, you're looking at someone else's.
It's not that I was checked out. It's that I wasn't invested in a sense. Like when I worked at CN Rail, I just like, I didn't feel completely like I was one of, among peers. You know what I mean? Like I didn't feel, it's a weird organization. Like I think large corporations in general are kind of weird because in some ways they're sort of like government. They're large bureaucracies full of people who are sort of lifers there. And a lot of them are hardworking and ambitious, and not all of them are, which is fine. Like one of the things that's great about large organizations, we don't need a society where everyone is type A. We need some people who just like want to go to work, do their job and go home. But it just felt like CN Rail felt like a place where people were beaten down by a miserable culture. And I just like, I couldn't, the entire time I was there, I couldn't feel like part of the team. I'm not part of this. I don't want to be part of this. So I did my job, but like it all, like I just wanted to get away from it the whole time. So I never fully, joined in with the culture.
Is this something like, do you think everybody, because I've lived this, I mean, there's aspects of that right now. I mean, does everyone have this experience if they're doing the corporate thing? Is that just does everyone do this, or are you and I overthinking it?
I think a lot of people, well, I think I mean, you and I have very different experiences because you just like you went all in and like made it. You went up the ranks. Your corporate thing is going great for you, from what I
It
can
is,
tell.
but I'm still every day doing the exact same thing, having the same internal conversation as you just described it, in the sense of, wait, like, does the,
Yeah, I think
who am
like
I?
so. Well, that's interesting. I mean, that I believe it. I actually that makes a lot of sense to me that happens with you, because to some extent it sometimes does feel like you are playing a role, and like that's just like a really fundamental difference between you and me, I think, in how we approach life. Like I do not, cannot, will not play a role. I just won't do it. I cannot do it. Like, to my poor Michelle's endless frustration, I cannot perform a feeling that I'm not feeling. I can't
Count
put
yourself
on a,
lucky, though, because I think the toll it takes when you do that for years, is not a good one. It's not.
yeah, I mean,
Uh,
there's pros and cons, man. Like, I've changed career paths so many times because like I end up somewhere where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I got to get out. And it's maybe not the most strategic time to make a move. And I've made so many lateral moves in my life. Like, I've never worked somewhere where I didn't do a good job. Um, I, but like, it's not the best for your career to just like move horizontally over and over and over again just because you want to get out of an organization. And like, so the way it felt always for me is like I'd be somewhere and I'd be like, I'm not part of this. I can't be part of this. This is not my life. I can't do this. Um, and so I'd see all my peers and she'd be like, well, isn't it interesting? What is going on with these people? Like, how is it that this is their 15th year of living like this? And
and they're going to do it for another 10, 20.
yeah, when you don't feel like you're among peers, like working together and operating on the same wavelength, you end up feeling more like an anthropologist, I guess, is sort of the thing. I just sort of always felt like an observer, even in my own workplaces, rather than like a participant.
Your
You know?
data on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah, not nearly as competent as Data, but yeah, in a sense that like I'm desperately trying to figure out how to
Be human.
how the humans operate. Sometimes you have leaders who actually care about outcomes, and for their flaws, they still recognize positive results. But then there's other leaders who have ego and they feel threatened by things, or they want to be the decider.
Being the decider is
Um,
important if you're an executive, and I can say that, without breaching any confidence, that even from what I see, most of them are brilliant people, but there's some insecurity. Like, I think if you're in a C-suite role, there's bound to be some insecurity with that, and I think people forget that being a leader at the top of an organization, corporate or government, it makes you feel insecure sometimes.
yeah, I mean, it all just looks so ridiculous to me. It just like, if making all that money and having all that clout, you're still like in the same dynamic of desperately trying to prove yourself and like hoping someone notices and like you get credit for this. It's just like, no, I don't want to live like that. No, thanks.
That,
So
yeah. That's why I wanted to ask you about this stuff, because most people, whether they will admit it or not, and you're actually admitting it, most people don't admit it. Most people are doing that. They're trying to get the credit. They're just, it's hustle culture, but they're trying to get the credit. And that's because they want to pay the bills. They want to do this. They want to do that. But at a certain point, you have some shit happen in your life where you realize it actually doesn't matter. And you've had that too, most recently, right? I mean, you got 2 kids. They're what, 3
and 6
and 6, which is insane because you're an old guy with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. We're the same age, and I've got, basically teenagers. But that's a lot to begin with. But some health challenges too that you guys had to deal with. That was really scary. And, I just know personally from talking to you that was the last couple of years have been tough, right? I think, fair to say.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
I mean, what can you say about what you had to go through? Yeah, I think it's real. I mean, the whole point of a RoadMiles discussion is, hey, we've got road miles on us for a reason, stuff that's accumulated in life that's shaped us. And it's not just the career bullshit, the college bullshit, nerd alert days. It's, all right, now I'm the father of a child that I don't know if they're healthy or not, or how they're going to survive, or if they're going to survive. And I got to deal with that. And that scares the shit out of any parent. So it's worth talking about if you can.
So our eldest, Miles, his first 3 years were perfectly normal. He was hitting all of his targets, developing completely normal. We had no reason to think anything was wrong. He was precocious. He was just a delight. I was, considered him an absurdly easy kid. Like he wouldn't throw tantrums. He was fun and cheerful and easy. It was just like a piece of cake having him as a kid. And then when he was 2.5, his brother came along, who came out like, oh yeah, you think it's easy being a parent? Fuck you! And spent the next 6 months screaming without stopping to breathe. The first day of Felix's life, he screamed more angrily than Miles ever had in his entire life up to that point. I had an Apple Watch, and I got a warning that I was in a dangerously loud environment every day.
Wow.
For that 6 months. It was crazy. It was intense. Michelle did all sorts of experiments cutting foods out because she was breastfeeding him. And we eventually, after a lot of experimenting, reached a point where we thought maybe if she didn't have dairy or soy, he'd be calmer. But anyway, all this to say, it was a pretty intense first 6 months of Felix's life. He took a lot out of us. And just around the 6-month mark, he started calming down. And, a few days before Miles's 3rd birthday, which would have been at the 6-month mark, because Felix was 2.5 years younger than Miles. Michelle made a comment about how the first 6 months of my mat leave were really tough, but I think we've found our groove, and the next 6 are going to be amazing. And then a few days later, a week after Miles turned 3, in the morning after breakfast, he just fell over on the couch, shaking like this, having a seizure. And we were both there, and it was just like a total shock. Never seen anything like this before. And I just like ran him straight to the hospital. And we were a few blocks from a hospital, so I was able to just put him in a stroller and run.
You physically ran him there?
I physically ran the entire way. And then that day he had 2 more seizures at the hospital. We were in the ER. I was that parent running around in the emergency room, yelling for help, getting ignored by staff while he was having a seizure in my arms while he was running around begging for help. No one was there to help.
That's terrifying.
It was awful. It was awful. And we still, at that point, had no idea what was going on. Surely this is just a weird thing and it'll pass. But it didn't pass. The seizures kept happening over the next few days. We kept hoping we'd be able to get out of the hospital. But instead we got transferred eventually after 3 days to sick kids. You know, when you think about how much work it is to keep a 3-year-old busy and happy, imagine when they've got an IV in and they've got all sorts of like tubes connected to them. So if they get up and they try to run around it all, they get all tangled up with these things. And because this was still in the days of COVID, we weren't allowed to leave our little room. And so like, imagine like how stir crazy a 3-year-old would get. And anyway, we started giving him some anti-seizure medicine, which didn't work. Upping the doses, we'd get a few days here and there where he wouldn't have seizures. But over the course of the next 9 months, we'd increase dosage of 1, 2, 3, ultimately 4 different drugs. He was at or above the maximum dose for 4 anti-seizure medicines. And he was still having seizures. Now, they don't really know, like most seizure meds, they don't know why they work. What they do know is that it sort of suppresses brain activity. And so, as you can imagine, there are like some undesirable side effects. And as a father, you know that age, like from 3 to 5, let's say, that is a critical age.
Brain activity is pretty important.
Their brains are exploding. They're forming new connections and understanding things and learning how their body moves in the world and making sense of things. I mean, like we're seeing it with Felix, who's 3.5 right now, and you know, the explosion is relentless. It's a wonderful thing to watch. For Miles, from the week after he turned 3, his brain just pummeled itself nonstop. Over the course of 9 months, he had more than 180 grand mal seizures. Those are the big ones. Probably thousands of seizures overall, if you count all the different types that he had, because there are a lot of different types of seizures. We never found out why he was having seizures. They ruled out genetic causes. They ruled out anything physical in the brain, like a tumor or that kind of thing. Never found an explanation.
Autoimmune.
We were beside ourselves. You can only imagine, like, how despondent we were by the end. It had gotten pretty grim, and like the toll on him was so obvious. Like between seizures, I mean, you can imagine how awful it is to watch your child having a seizure, but just as awful was watching him between seizures. His shirt was constantly drenched with drool because he couldn't stop himself from drooling. Like he couldn't keep his mouth closed. He didn't have the physical coordination. He couldn't walk straight. Like if you watched him walking down the hall, you would think, oh, that child drank a glass of vodka. It was horrible to see. There was a good long while where we made him wear a helmet all the time because he was falling over so much, just like walking around, he'd just fall over and hurt himself. So not even when he's not having seizures, he'd fall and hit his head. So, it's a really, really awful thing to watch. And they say that if 2 anti-seizure meds don't work, the odds of another one working are less than 10%. So once we tried 4 and that wasn't working, we were like, we're just never going to get this under control. Is this going to kill him? Like, so that was pretty horrible. I was sleeping on the floor in his room so that I would hear if he had a seizure, because we were also terrified about him having a seizure that killed him in the night.
So you weren't sleeping at all?
Not sleeping well, that's for sure. I was sleeping on the floor in his room. Like, we're like vigilant every second of every day. There's no breaks because he could have seizures at any time. We were tracking them in a spreadsheet. We tried to like see if there were patterns. Never found a reliable pattern that would say like, okay, this is what we need to worry about. It was just chaotic. And one of the things we had heard about early on that seemed like a long shot, seemed implausible, was the ketogenic diet. It turns out that the ketogenic diet was actually developed for epilepsy. And
so they never actually found the cause, but you go to a ketogenic diet.
So,
now,
okay, so
tell me what a keto, I think I know what a ketogenic
diet was. Sorry, what?
I think I know what a ketogenic diet is, but I don't know for sure. Tell me what it is.
Well, I'll tell you what I knew at the time was it was a fad diet. That's what I knew about it. I didn't know anything else. It just seemed like a long shot, like not going to work. And then we learned a little more about it, and it turns out that it was actually originally developed for epilepsy. More than 100 years ago. And it actually has its roots all the way back in ancient Greece when they already knew that fasting could do something to help control seizures. And the ketogenic diet sort of was developed as they came to understand that it wasn't fasting per se. It was that when you fast, your body is using fat for energy instead of carbs. And your body converts fat into ketones in order to use it as energy. And when your body is converting fat to ketones, whether it's your body fat or fat that you ate, your body is in a state of ketosis. And some interesting things happen in your brain when you're in ketosis. And this isn't across the board true, but in the case of Miles, it cured his seizures. it is an enormous challenge doing the diet. Like we were planning all of his meals in an Excel file. We had a
You had to
scale.
weigh things by the gram, right? Like
We had not by the gram. We had to weigh things
milligram.
by the 1/10 of a gram. 1/10 of a gram. Planned out every meal to hit a perfect ratio of fat to non-fat in every meal. But also, he had a G tube because he couldn't swallow liquids. One of the things that happened because of the seizures was his swallow reflex got so weakened that he kept getting pneumonia because he would, water would trickle into his
Aspirate.
lungs.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can't do that with olive oil. And like he, for a 3-year-old, the amount of fat you're supposed to get in each meal works out to about 30 milliliters of oil on top of the food with every meal. So if he didn't have a G-tube, we'd be making him drink 30 milliliters of oil or mixing that oil in with other food and like making him eat every bite. Like getting a young child to eat every bite is hard. But he had a G-tube, which allowed us to at least get around some of that. And, it felt like unbelievably horrifying and surreal to put a G-tube into him. When you see them poke a hole in your little baby's stomach and stick a valve in it, just feels wrong. But it was our last ditch effort. We'd waited months. We'd begged desperately to get a G-tube for him because we couldn't get him onto the diet without it, and we were out of hope. It was our last hope. Eventually, we got that G-tube in. The weekend before we started the diet, he had 18 grand mal seizures in 2 days. Within a day of starting the diet, the seizures stopped, and he hasn't had one since.
How long ago was that?
It was his last seizure was June 15th, more than 2 years ago. So 2023.
That was this. So they stopped the same weekend that you started the keto diet?
Yeah. That's not normal. We were bracing ourselves for like 6 or 7 months of making him do the diet before we found out whether it works or not.
What did the doctors say about how abnormal that was?
Doctors are very reluctant to, speculate. And, just because he hasn't had seizures for a few days, they weren't going to be like, looks like this is working. They're like, let's just see how things go.
Surely they're not still saying that.
Well, no, he's off the diet now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's tell me. I know. So I remember you saying.
So it was a long couple of years doing this diet. Really tough for him. You imagine going to kindergarten and not getting he had a nurse attending to him because he has this G-tube. So all the other kids, they have snack. There's all sorts of food-based social things that happen. Miles was left out of all of it. And he had this nurse sitting with him to feed him his meals and like give him water and oil and stuff through his G-tube. So that was all pretty tough for him, I think. But, considering where we were before we started the diet, we'll take it. And now, after more than 2 years, they gave us the green light to start weaning him off the diet, because the idea is that when your brain is developing that much, like at that age, if you can go a few years without any seizures, like the new neural pathways will have formed, it's quite possible that whatever was causing the seizures will have passed.
He's literally potentially grown out of it.
Yeah. We don't know. We don't know, but we hope so.
Yeah, which is great news. I mean, I'm really happy to hear that. But for you guys, like that, how did you get? I mean, how did you get through that in one piece?
Well, I don't know if it was in one piece. It was a strain. I mean, like it was hard in a lot of ways. It was exhausting. I mean, you're constantly advocating. Anyone who has dealt with the health system knows that if you're not an advocate, no one else is going to do it for you. And his case was just so complex that it was taking everything Michelle and I had to keep track of everything and to advocate for him the way he needed.
You put your own oxygen mask on before you help others, and that's because if you're passed out, you can't help the people that are depending on you. Mm-hmm. How did you did you try to do any of that along the way?
No, I mean, there was no opportunity. It was relentless. I cannot overstate how relentless it was. When he was having seizures, there was nothing we could have done other than, stand sentinel. We're watching, worrying, and doing what we can. Like Michelle and I we were so stressed all the time that we ended up having a code. If we were calling each other, the first thing, if I called Michelle or Michelle called me, the first thing we would say is like, not a seizure, if we weren't calling about a seizure. Because like our heart would leap.
Can't imagine starting every phone call with your spouse with
eventually so what we ended up eventually doing was like, if we called with WhatsApp, it's not a seizure. If we call just like regular phone, it is. And that way we'd know before answering.
Smart.
But like that was like, it was completely all consuming, I would try to get little moments for myself here. And I mean, I spent a lot of time living in the hospital, right? Like I was in the hospital whenever Miles was, because Michelle had to be nursing Felix and stuff like that. So, I mean, she would come during the day, but I was the one sleeping there most of the time. And I'd try to get moments of respite, but like you never knew when a seizure was going to come. So you're just like, there's no taking care of your own needs, really. I mean, there were times where I was trying to work when we were not in the hospital. And like part of that was self-preservation. Like I needed to just shift gears. And like if I'm focusing on work, then I'm not just spending every minute worrying about seizures. But like then there'd be times where I go from like having Miles having a seizure in my arms till like the seizure ends, I put him down so he can sleep, and I go jump on a Zoom call. And I'm like, within 30 seconds, going from that to being in a meeting, trying to talk about work stuff. And to be clear, like no one was putting that pressure on me. That was like me trying to give my brain a break by having something else to focus on. I had a good arrangement because I had a very understanding boss at the time who just knew if I just hung up in the middle of a call, it was because I had an emergency. Yeah. If I just didn't appear online one day, I was probably in the hospital. She was very clear that I never needed to worry about work when something was going on with him.
Are you, do you think of yourself as an optimistic person?
No,
Or do you,
God.
or are you more of a pessimist, or are you cynical?
I'm not cynical.
What I've always enjoyed about spending time with you, and we haven't had a lot in the last 10 years, but when we had more, and even when we do, you're quick to point out the absurd stuff in life. You're quick to kind of call out hypocrisy, particularly in your friends, but also just, observe it in general. And I was always kind of, trying to think, is Dave cynical, or is he pessimistic, or is it neither?
Yeah, those aren't the only options. I mean, I could talk a lot about this topic. There's a really nice line. I don't know if you watched that George Carlin documentary that came out a year or two ago.
No.
Really good sort of biography of his. And there's a line he has in it. An interviewer is asking him if he's like, why he's so cynical, or if he's a cynic. And he's like, scratch a cynic, and under that surface, any cynic, you'll find a disappointed idealist. Cynicism isn't about yourself. Cynicism is like a bias against human nature. That's my definition of cynicism, is like an assumption that people's worst nature is motivating them. It's sometimes confused as a word with skepticism, but those are very different things. Skepticism is just like taking things, or like not taking things at face value without evidence. Cynicism
Wanting
is
proof
like,
of something. Yeah.
cynicism is like assuming the worst. I believe in every person's capability to be kind, generous, selfless, like part of the community. All of that. I believe other than psychopaths, I believe everyone is capable of it. And so every single day I look around and I see reasons to be disappointed in humanity because it is falling so far short.
Seemingly more than ever, right? There's an overabundance of reasons.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is no one lives up to their own ideals, or almost no one does. I don't live up to my own ideals, and I could easily, look myself in the mirror and, question whether I'm being as kind and
But
so
you're
on as
talking
I
about
can.
kindness, but there's other ideals. I mean, why the focus on kindness?
What are the other ideals?
I'm asking you. I mean, maybe
there are all sorts of things that still matter to people. I just feel like, kindness might not be quite the right word. I just feel like our obligation to society is being ignored in modern culture. I think our attitudes about taxation are a good example of it. Like in the West, people just hate taxes.
I got to pay some money so that someone else gets something for free.
Yeah, exactly. There's a line, I can't remember who it's from, but like basically taxation is the price we pay for civilization. It seems so obvious to me that at this point, in my life. It seems so obvious to me that no one is the author of their own life. No one's the author of their own choices or thoughts. And because if things work out really well for you, although you may have worked very hard, there are a lot of factors that contributed to it beyond yourself. You know, maybe some of the benefits should go to the community.
The people that haven't worked as hard.
Well, some of them have.
Yeah. So the ideal you're talking about is equality or redistribution.
No, it's not. The ideal is feeling a sense. It's not. I mean, taxation is an illustration of it, like, because it's just sort of taken as a given that people hate taxes now. So it's sort of an illustration of it. But like, you see it in so many facets of modern life that we don't have a fabric, like what's the word? Like, the fabric of our community is like really threadbare now.
Do you have, at this point in life, do you have regrets?
When I was younger, I'd say I was like cynical and sarcastic. And I just think that, like, it's a cheap and easy way to feel like you understand what's going on. Like, snark it feels really good to land some like really sarcastic comment or whatever, right? Like, but it is so cheap and corrosive in a way. So I've soured on some of those things a lot as I've gotten older.
Dare I ask, but like, going through all the stuff of the past few years, has it just made you a little more optimistic? You've got more faith in, I don't know, humanity, the community, people that have helped you?
No, I probably have less faith than ever in humanity. But like, I mean, none of this happened in isolation, right? Like, I've been increasingly worried about climate change. I redirected my entire career in the last few years to like focus more on climate change because of how worried about the future I am. And COVID happened, and like early in COVID, I started feeling optimistic about society's ability to come together when things really count. Because it did seem like, people early on seemed like people were following the rules, and we were all like making sacrifices,
banging pots and pans,
making sacrifices to protect the vulnerable. This was about the immunocompromised, the elderly, and the babies and stuff like that. And I was really impressed that people were actually doing it. And then the vaccine came along, and it was like, wow, science is incredible. Like, we actually figured just unreal. And it actually gave me a new hope about climate change. It was like, when we really start noticing that there are real world, things going on, you can see the consequences of not coming together and doing the right thing. We actually can do it. And then all of that fell apart, and then Trump was reelected, not reelected, but like elected again. And it's just like, from that peak in early-ish COVID of faith in humanity, it's just been like eroded in so many ways since then. All of these things happening that have just made it so hard for me to feel. I just don't think people can help being the way they are. And, one of the things that's like become so obvious in the last few years is feeling when people feel like they're being scolded, they're not going to listen at all. And like, it's the reason we got Trump again, right? Like,
Yeah.
just the left, and I would consider myself, leftish. But like the left got so sanctimonious that they lost the support of all of the people that they were supposedly fighting for. One of the benefits of letting go of the idea of free will is that you also let go of the idea that people deserve blame.
You think we have? Sorry, are you a proponent of free will? Or are you saying people don't actually?
No, I don't think free will exists
at all. Like,
not in a meaningful way.
So our choice to have this conversation was not our choice.
It depends on what you mean by choice. Like it feels like a choice. You went through some stuff.
Yeah.
We've been talking a bit about what led you to the point where this podcast was something that you wanted to do. You've had some health scares.
Big time.
Your parents are getting older. You've had your share of identity crises. And, everything that you've been going through, like you've been on a journey and you've been looking for things It's not like out of a pure, completely impartial logic, you decided, I'm going to start running. You were like in a place where you're like looking for something because of your health and your mental and physical health, and like running presented itself as something that like, well, I should give that a try. And it clicked for you.
Felt like a choice. It felt like a choice,
but like it was a choice. I mean, it could have been cycling. It could have been some other thing. But like, and like, it could have been just descending into alcoholism and becoming a total mess of a human being.
Came pretty close to that.
It could have been, but why didn't it?
I think I became obsessed with running because it was a way to get completely absorbed, fully into a flow state on an activity that had nothing to do with anything I'd done previously, wasn't career related, and felt really good, and took up a lot of the extra energy that I know I've got that's just never been directed into one thing. And then, running has since morphed into, okay, what, I'm interested in health and wellness, but I'm interested in why are people compelled to do stuff, right? And
yeah,
it's just one compulsion replaced for another in some ways. I'm also obsessed. I'm a bit of a hypochondriac. So getting a health scare, being told that, guess what? I got about a 35% risk of dying from heart stuff in the next 10 years. Most people have 2%. It motivated me to just get out and do something different. And maybe that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but so that's,
Yeah.
that's
So my
take on it.
question is like, a lot of circumstances, like from my point of view, a lot of circumstances led to running happening, and like those things happened outside of you.
See what you're doing here, Dave. So because of those circumstances, I'm like, do you think about is destiny a concept you believe in?
No, I mean, I don't think it's a helpful concept because it makes it sound like someone is planning things, like there's some higher force that's planning things, and that's not what I mean. What I mean by the absence of free will is that all these things that feel like we're doing them independently, there's just like all these forces that are influencing us so much that even when it feels like a choice, it's like effectively inevitable because of all of those forces.
Yeah.
I mean, and like one of the things that's also really helpful for like really understanding the limits of yourself as an author of your actions and thoughts is meditating, right? Like, because when you try to sit and
I can't do
quiet your mind,
I can't.
and just don't think about anything, just listen to your breathing. The number of things your brain will just be like, well, what about this? How about this thing? But
some people can do it. Can you do it? I can't do it. Have you meditated?
I would say I got huge benefits from the meditating I have done that have made a permanent effect, or they've had a permanent effect on me, which is this understanding of like how little control over my own brain I have. It's so shocking how long you can go before you even notice that you've been thinking about stuff. Like you're like, okay, all I'm going to do now is listen to my own breathing. And that's it. I'm going to count my breaths, no other thinking. And then you'll like think about laundry for a whole minute.
Without realizing it.
Without even realizing. And they're like, wait, oh. And I mean, it's very discouraging at first. But what you come to learn is that is the practice. Like even really good meditators, their mind does wander and they notice and then they pull it back. That happening isn't you failing to meditate. That is meditating.
That actually is meditating.
And so like it's very encouraging to understand in a way that like you get that no matter how good at meditating you are. It's not like master meditators suddenly their mind just goes totally quiet. They may be able to sustain that sort of serenity longer, but their brain goes places and they pull it back. And that's the entire exercise. And what I got from that is that I just like understand deeply that I'm not, in a way, there's like no self, like there's no me, there's no essential me at the core here. There's just like all these neurons firing that have constructed an identity. And you get a little bit less attached to some things if you get out of the habit of believing that your identity is some like really important thing. And whenever I do something wrong and when you make a mistake, you may feel bad about it, but you also like are able to come up with a story to explain to yourself why it was okay. And there is some bias to that, but it's also true. Like
Yeah.
there were reasons why you made that mistake. And like that's true for every other person too. And we're like now in a society where like there's so many forces. Think about how when you construct an entire society the way ours is, certain behaviors and patterns of thought become more likely. Part of what has happened in our politics, and the physical construction of our world, I really think it makes people more selfish.
Because we're more isolated?
We're more isolated. We have all our needs met. If you live in a big house in the suburbs or whatever, your own home protects you from needing a movie theater and a library and a cafe. And it makes it, because of the location, it makes it impossible for you to use public transportation. You got to drive, which means you're alone for that too. And because you're so far from other people, socializing becomes a lot more of an ordeal. The connections with other people become either it's a core person or non-existent. Like before, you'd have this rich array of, light relationships,
acquaintances. Yeah.
Your local pharmacist, there's all that stuff. You can't fix society's ills by personally boycotting, Walmart and Amazon. So like it isn't hypocritical to like use those things yourself, in my opinion. But I do think that we have like slowly made these choices as a society that have like caused us to forget each other's humanity in a way and like to value each other. And it was just like commuting every day in a car made me realize that, because I saw it happening to myself and I didn't like it,
And so how did you change it?
I quit. I quit my job,
but was the
because
job
I wanted
the
to
only
work
thing
downtown.
But did that help, like physically going to a different job in a different physical place?
Yeah. I mean, it didn't solve all my problems, but like I was a lot happier when I could, bike or take the subway to work than I was when I had to drive.
So you've always, I think, you've always kind of said that you hate small talk.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that the fabric of what you're describing? Like going and like how do I reconcile the fact that Dave I think I know hates small talk, but he wants to go talk to the local pharmacist and walk to the coffee shop and walk home?
No, I don't want to. I don't want to. But you know how like one of the things that's like so clear now is how avoiding boredom at all costs has been really bad for our brains. Like I don't know about you, like I can't do anything without listening to a podcast or something, like being trapped with my thoughts. I try to avoid it at all costs. And
even for 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But we're so conditioned, right? That the article I sent you, I think you said you hadn't read it. Maybe you did, but it's weird. It's weird if you haven't, because that was the core theme. It's that we're so conditioned, to distracting ourselves
Yeah.
that we have
I
to
mean,
do that. I was standing in
it's sort
line
of
this
like-
morning to drop off. I can't find it to show it on the video, but I had a 3-liter bucket of my own pee that I collected over 24 hours, and I got to drop it off at the lab this morning. Somehow I left the phone in my vehicle while I'm waiting in line for maybe 10 minutes. Just me standing there with a bucket of pee, staring at the rest of the people in the room. Impossibly awkward. Nothing to scroll through, you know?
Did you make some observations? Do you have any interesting?
There were a lot of people wondering what was in my bucket. That's for sure. But yeah, you're right. We're conditioned.
My point is just like, it doesn't matter that I don't like it.
Do you let your kids feel boredom? Like, do you want your kids to experience boredom?
Yeah,
do you force it on them?
I mean, no. I mean, what can you do? Just to complete the thought, like, I'm gonna go back for a second. Like, I desperately try to avoid boredom at every moment, even though I know that if I could let myself, I'd have good ideas. I'd have better ideas. Like, there's a whole thing about, the expression shower thoughts.
Yeah.
I don't have shower thoughts anymore because I'm always listening to a podcast when I have a shower.
You listen to podcasts in the shower?
Yeah. That's when I listen to the daily. Like, I'm getting the news.
I'll have to ask you how you do that another time, but
I've got a little surface where I can stick my phone and anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, I know that it would be good for me. And like, no, I would way rather order everything online than go to a store. I hate doing that stuff. I don't like it. But there are all sorts of things that, like, even though you don't want to do them, they end up being good for you that you do, and interacting with other people is one of them. Like, I'm not a 100% pure introvert, but I'm pretty introverted. And so, like, that's one of the things with small talk. Small talk has never come easy to me because I find it very hard to do. And it's like topics that aren't like meaty.
It is hard to do, though. It is hard because you want, you're an authentic person. It's an overused word, but small talk is not all that authentic.
But it can be. Like, I do know people who have a real knack for it, and it's not just like talking nonsense. There's something to it. It just makes you feel part of the community, when you chat with someone, even if it's a small thing, like, we're experiencing the same weather,
The people that that have a knack for it, like, I know some of those too, but I can't put my finger on what they do. But it looks easy. It looks fun.
You know how some people just, like, they're just interested in people. They'll just, like, make little comments to, like, a stranger. The idea of saying something random to someone in an elevator is, like, unimaginable to me. But, like, sometimes you get in an elevator with someone and they just, like, start, like, a quick chat with someone they've never met before in the elevator about, like, something that they noticed. And it's like, that's not exactly small talk, but those people that do that, they are also the ones who are very good at small talk, right? Like, because they just, like, they've got something to say and they know how to get a response out of people.
I don't want to say it's fun if you try and offend someone, but it can be. It can be. If you just flirt with something that might just offend someone a little bit. Like, I was in an airport lineup with someone and I just said, I think you should have gotten here earlier.
But that's funny, though. That's funny. That couldn't have offended them.
I wasn't trying to be funny. I just thought I should say that. I don't know what prompted me to say it. And the guy kind of looked at me like, how the fuck would you know what time I should have been here and why? And turned out he was running late and he was stressed about missing his flight. So was I. And it was just that I got to do more of that.
I wonder whether podcasts is cheating because it gives you this simulacrum of relationships. They're all like parasocial relationships, but you're like experiencing a modicum of human interaction and like intellectual stimulation by listening to all these, smart people talking about smart things.
Or talking about anything.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's a substitute for something. Maybe.
But if you moved, if you didn't take your phone with you, you went out to live in the woods. I mean, maybe you'd have a few books and that would be something. But like, I have a feeling eventually you'd go a little stir crazy.
Yeah. Maybe. I mean, what's the longest you've gone in the last 5 years without access to your cell phone?
I don't know, an hour? Well, if I go to a movie,
but you still have access.
One of the things
you can walk out. Yeah,
no,
you have access.
Yeah, true. Okay, in theoretical access. But like, it's one of the things I do love about movie theaters is like it's one place where you're locked in.
Yeah.
Focus wise, like my phone's on airplane mode. There's no pausing this. We're here. It's funny about podcasts, like this is the longest conversation you and I have had probably since McGill.
Guaranteed.
And the only reason is because you decided to make a podcast, which was like, I feel like, have you heard the joke that like, golf was invented because it's the only way a man could ask another man to go for a walk with him?
I think some version of it.
Some version of that. I can't remember what the exact thing is, but I feel like these days it's like the only way to finally log your friend down for a conversation is for one of you to start a podcast.
Let me say this, Dave. You're actually the first stop on the guest train for this. There's a bunch of other folks I'm really hoping to interview and talk to, none of whom I know personally, right? But I wanted to start with someone I think I know, because what I was guessing is I don't actually know this person as well as I think I do. And that sounds like a really cliche setup. Oh, talk to the best friend that you actually never see that much because you don't live in the same city. Reminisce about college, fast forward to the present, get deep and philosophical. But that is kind of what I wanted to do, because I wondered if you would get to this point of, proving that thesis, which you're doing, which is that, hey, the podcast as a platform it's a means to an end. And the end isn't produce a podcast. It's connect with people in a more real way. Ironically, over a digital medium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, once you have the big Conan O'Brien bucks and everyone is listening to your podcast, you can fly me out.
Yeah,
for a sequel.
It'd be better to do it in person.
You may have like 5 to 10 minutes worth of material in here once you trim all the. Sorry, my bladder is going to explode.
Okay. Well,
are we going to do a
do a
second session to
Yep.
Yeah,
wrap it all up? Okay.